Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, I need
Just
a
saying. But what?
pen.
You need a pen, Catherine?
There's
I can
plethora
get
of
you one.
pens around here usually.
I'm sure there are.
Leonard has an extra one, so I
Oh,
would just steal his.
thank you, Jim.
You got one?
I'm
That's for
safe.
signing check. Have all the non-alternate directors here signed the bank thing?
Bank statement, I have.
Alternates don't, no.
Alternates don't sign
You know,
it.
Right, that's why I said all the
Oh, all
non-alternate
right.
directors.
Well, there's like 4 blanks there.
I could have said regular directors, but then that opens it up for
Okay.
side remarks.
Thank you.
As long as you didn't say normal director, because that would exclude.
As I said, that opens it up for snide remarks.
It's getting worse.
Okay, we
All
can, we
right.
can halt this. You ready to go?
I'm not ready to go.
Good evening, everybody. This is the regular meeting of the Sewer Authority Midcoastside Board of Directors for March 23rd. Roll call, please.
Director Muller,
Here.
Vice Chair Ruddick. Absent.
Speaking a bit.
Okay, Chair Loman.
Here.
Director Slater Carter.
present.
Director Lauren.
Here.
Director Harvey.
Here.
Let's have the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Can we have the flags put in the correct positions, please? It's supposed to be, the US flag's supposed to be to audience right, and the dais is not raised.
Thank you, Leonard. Before we launch into public comment, did we have to officially appoint a secretary pro tem? I would like to officially appoint Catherine Slater Carter to be able to sign any secretary documents tonight. Okay. We just whipped right through that. Zoom. Public comment. Is there any public who would like to comment on any items not on the agenda? I see no hands or no public. Oh, Leonard, yes, Mr. Public.
Granite Community Services District has our packets online on our website. I don't know if the title column header's been changed yet. It says agendas, but it's actually got the whole packet there starting in January of this year.
Nice.
I guess I will make a comment. Wednesday night at Midcoast Community Council, I believe the discussion, the point of discussion, if not there, it is the new Princeton plan. And for those who are on the Mid-Coast and have concerns about what Princeton is planned to be as compared to what it is, I would suggest paying attention to this, possibly attending and making your opinion known.
My opinion was it's a solution in search of a problem.
I have a public comment, and I will credit Catherine Slater Carter for some of these remarks that I'm going to rip off unabashedly from her. Everybody knows we got a water crisis. Everybody knows we're running out of water. Everybody knows people have said that it's a reasonable possibility by the end of the year in California we will have no water. Everybody understands that. People are cutting back, probably not enough. But that's not what I want to say tonight. I don't know the official laws and things like that, which I will be researching and trying to get into an editorial. But California law requires a huge number of homes to be built every year, something I think in the 700,000 category or something like that. These are distributed across the state. Every county gets an allocation of you're supposed to build these homes because it keeps the economy going and things like that. Under normal conditions, like we have been economically, things are improving, and that's not an issue. I do have an issue, however, and I'd like everybody to talk to their congressman. If we're trying to load more millions of people into the state as we have no water, that's a problem. Groups have had moratoriums temporarily. I'm not talking shutting down construction, but if we are truly running out of water, there is no point in cramming more and more people. That means two things. One, the farms will run out of water. We will have no food. All of your personal bills will go up, obviously, and you will be spending more money for less water and endanger the farms not having food. So I would encourage everybody to ask our California government, maybe it's time for a small moratorium on construction until we actually have water. As soon as water appears again and reservoirs start filling, then fine, go ahead. But right now, adding hundreds of thousands of homes is just going to hurt us right now. So, thank you. Consent agenda. Anybody want to pull anything from the consent agenda?
Yes.
Which ones?
Minutes and disbursements.
Disbursements, okay. I'll accept a motion to accept the manager's monthly reports, which includes flows, financials, monthly reports, and the collection system, and we will pull the minutes and the disbursements.
So moved?
Is there a second?
Second.
Second, thank you. Okay, all those in favor of approving those 4 items?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, any opposed? Nope. Okay, Leonard, on the minutes.
I don't know why I didn't catch these things when I got the advance copy of the minutes. Under item 6, says Director Warren also requested data on the replacement and rebuilding of the Portola pump station. Close, I missed it by that much. What I asked for was the rebuilding of the Portola pump station, the replacement and rebuilding of the Portola pump station pumps. So basically one word missing there. And let's see, where does this go? Where we corrected the minutes for the previous month. That's still not right. And now I'm not seeing it. Where in here did we correct the minutes in the previous month?
Number 9.
My note ended up in the wrong
Number 9.
place. Okay, there it is. The correction that I requested to the January minutes was that the motion I had made was to return the excess money to the member agencies in accordance with each agency's paid percentage. And it didn't say of the operating budget because sometimes there's other excess payments that aren't operating budget and they're not necessarily in the same percentages, so I did not have the last few words there in the motion. It was just paid percentage. And that ties directly into why I asked for the disbursements to be held for discussion. So if we could do 2 things, we have to amend the February minutes to correct the correction that I asked for, and then we have to go back and amend the January minutes yet again. So the correction of the February minutes is to end the sentence after the word percentage. And I don't know what the procedure would be for amending the January minutes again.
Well, why don't we just correct what was done in February, because that was a correction, shouldn't that do it?
Well, we still have to go out and correct the official published minutes, which,
Yeah.
you know, they're on paper somewhere and they're on the website.
So I think, a motion to further correct the January minutes, wouldn't it?
I guess.
Yeah. By deleting those last 5 words.
Okay. So, Rick, do you want to take these 2 things separately, the minutes and then the disbursements?
Yes, go ahead.
All right, so I move we amend the February and January minutes as discussed.
I think February's is done. we did it wrong, so you're not, we wanna go back and amend the.
Well, the February minutes indicate what the amendment was to January
Yeah.
minutes, that's what makes this so ugly.
Complicated, okay, I think we, yeah. Let's do both then, let's get.
All right, so the motion was to amend the February and January minutes.
Didn't get a second on that?
Wall second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? No. Approved? Thank you. Item number 2, Leonard, the disbursements.
Now, the problem is that the refunds, I actually went and added up 3 refund checks and then divided each of those checks by the total. And the answer I got is simply not possible. Because FMV's refund percentage is to within 3 decimal places, 50.5%. Granada's to within 3 decimal places is 29.5%, and Montero's to within 3 decimal places is 20%. Not possible. Because those are the payments for operating, and those are based on flow. And the flow percentages can't possibly line up to 3 decimal places of the plant ownership percentage.
Well, they could, but it's highly unlikely.
Right. As a college professor said, the chances of something can't be 0, but they can be indistinguishable from 0.
What would be the correct solution that you're looking for?
Staff has to go back and see what the flow percentages were and recompute those 3 checks. So to approve the disbursements, we have to pull those 3, and wherever they are here, they have to be pulled out of the stacks and not signed.
Do you folks know off the top of your heads if that calculation was made based on the ownership percentages or on the flow percentages?
I believe when we presented the staff report for the original authorization to give that money back, we asked for authorization to give it back based on ownership.
And I objected to it at the time.
But did it pass?
I don't remember what we did. I think that my objection was,
They chose actually.
And maybe you better go back and look at the minutes.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's gonna be.
If we say off the top that they were distributed according to the ownership percentages,
Well, then that's how GSD gets, the GCSD gets screwed the second time around on the same set of numbers. No, we're not gonna do that. We're gonna do it right.
so should they be distributed on the flow percentages?
They were paid on the flow percentages, they have to be
I'm getting
refunded on the
yeses,
flow
no.
percentages.
So we would just hand that back to the staff to recalculate that
And pull those checks.
and pull those checks, pull those 3 checks, which we will. Okay, don't sign those 3 checks when you see them here. We'll just pull those after the meeting when we actually do the signing. Okay?
That's good.
I actually have a question on the memo in front of the disbursements. I'm confused. So this is on page 33 of the packet. The description of the check to Calicon Systems. It says, along with miscellaneous work on San Pablo and Montero lift stations, maintenance on the Portola and Naples Beach pump station. The only problem is that San Pablo is what Sam insists on calling the Naples Beach pump station, so it's 2 different names for the same facility. And we really need to have Sam start calling it with the name that GCSD calls it, which is the Naples Beach pump station. We've only been asking for that for around 15 years. So can staff explain what this is supposed to say, since what it says doesn't seem to make sense to me? I'm confused.
Is that as simple as just advising everybody to use the new name in the future?
Well, no, because it says it's miscellaneous work on 2 lift stations and maintenance on 2 pump stations, but in the terminology we use here, I don't think that Naples Beach is considered a pump station.
Beach lift station? Is it
It's
always a
just
lift
considered a
station?
lift station.
So that should be corrected to read lift station.
So, but Leonard is saying that the San Pablo is the same as the Naples Beach,
That is
Are they
correct.
one
and
and
they
the
are
same?
both lift stations.
So it says miscellaneous work and it lists San Pablo, and then it says maintenance and lists Naples Beach.
So if it were going to be correct, it would say along with miscellaneous work on Naples Beach lift station, Montero lift station, and maintenance on the Portola pump station.
Correct.
Got it.
So, so it shouldn't list Naples Beach at all under the maintenance part?
No, I
Okay.
think the way Catherine read it through the chair, could I read it and then? Okay, so
Sure.
it says this payments for quarterly meter calibration at pump stations and plant, along with miscellaneous work on Naples Beach and Montero lift stations, maintenance on the Portola pump station and the Sam plant. Is that
Okay,
satisfactory?
if, that makes sense to me if that's what it's supposed to say.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, so if there's no other comments on the disbursements, I move that we approve the disbursements with the exception of the three overage refund checks, which will be recomputed, and the correction to the paragraph about Calcon systems.
Maybe for clarity's sake, you might want to look at the check numbers
Yeah.
on those.
I didn't know if everybody wanted to wait for me to scroll through and find those.
Well, it appears it would be
Yeah.
76823, maybe?
So through the chair, I have
Yeah,
them.
that,
Ma'am?
Jenna has the numbers.
Okay, great, but I think we should put those in the
Well,
minutes.
76824 is Half Moon Bay, City of
Right.
Half Moon Bay.
76823 is Granadas.
Granada.
And disbursement, 76822 for Montero Water and Sanitary
Okay,
District.
so it's-
And we'll void those checks out and
Perfect.
redistribute at the next board meeting on new checks.
Okay,
Okay.
Thank you.
I have a second to Leonard's motion.
I second the motion.
You, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed or abstentions? No.
I didn't jump in and say aye at the right time.
That's okay. Won't let you off this time. Okay, we're done with the consent agenda, so we're gonna move on to item 4, which is old business. This is the, the update regarding the SAM staffing, SAM engineering and construction contracts, manager, SAM collection maintenance worker requirements.
Directors, I wanted to give you a brief status report on SAM recruiting. We went and did interviews of our 3 finalist candidates for the engineering and construction contracts manager. We've got what we consider one outstanding candidate, who happens to have a master's degree in engineering and a very deep background in sewer facility, sewer plant upgrades, force main upgrades, dealing with SSMP development and things like that. I have 3 copies of the final recruitment books, which have the resumes of the 3 individuals if the SAM Personnel Committee would like to review them. It is our intention to put forth an offer of employment letter to Kishan Prithavandi is the individual's name, subject to him passing a successful background check, which I really don't doubt that he will. So within the next couple of weeks, once we get that information back from Bob Murray, we should have a good candidate and perhaps a timeline of, say, 6 weeks for him to be on site.
I would suggest that the personnel committee needs to review the resumes before the offer is put forward, and the reason for that is the suggestion and expectation that whoever's hired into that position could very well be the interim manager, and I don't think that we can have an interim manager that the board didn't approve.
I'm willing to entertain that. With the caveat, I would say that as far as the 3 top candidates, there really is only one that I think has the background in this, in sewer industry-specific engineering, construction management, and managerial skills that is qualified.
Is he an RCE?
Civil engineer, yes. He's got a master's in engineering, design, PE in mechanical engineering, project management certificate out of Caltech, and he's working on his Lean Six Sigma certification from UC Riverside. He should be done with that next month.
My goodness.
Well, since the personnel committee is ad hoc, maybe we can have a meeting on the phone, subject to Director Qualcheck's availability.
Could you shoot a, do we have electronic copy of that we could send to Rick or Scott?
I can make a
Or we
copy.
can figure out how to just get it to them physically.
Actually, I do need to mention something else about the committee. The minutes show that the committee is Director Qualcheck and Director Boyd and myself, and I told that to Director Boyd, and he said, "What?" And he said he can't do it, and he wants to substitute Director Harvey for himself. Is that okay with you?
That's fine. You could hand a copy to Jim, and we've got 2/3 of the committee already, that's good. And if you could just possibly call Rick during, tomorrow and just try to have him swing by and grab a copy so we can get it real quick, but we don't want to be in the way. If he's the obvious candidate and totally qualified, let's move. But that'll give everybody a quick chance to look at it.
I think Rick might be gone all week, I'm not sure, do you know, John?
Yeah, I know he had a father issue in Michigan.
Well, that's too bad.
Well, no, I think it's birthday or something.
Oh, that's good.
Hopefully.
Do you figure he'd be available for
I have no
minutes by
idea.
phone?
I'm sure.
Would you want to take a shot at reviewing it, Debbie?
Well, I can check in with him and see what he'd like to do.
Okay.
How's that?
And then if
I don't
he's,
see any reason why we wouldn't be able to maybe scan the document and I could send it to him electronically.
okay,
Yeah, we can, I'll check.
whatever
with him.
process works, if you folks want to coordinate, that's great. Any other thoughts or comments on that?
Mr. Chairman, you want to just reflect in your minutes that you've appointed,
Okay.
yeah, Director Murray to replace Director Boyd.
If you could do that, Susie, that'd be great.
Yes.
Or Harvey, excuse me, sorry.
Miss Harvey.
Harvey, Harvey's a different.
This is Montero people, we're all,
We all look alike.
yeah. Any other comments on item 4 for old business? Okay, we will move onward, on to new business.
Actually, one more quick question on 4A. If we make an offer to the guy you're recommending, what start date do you and he figure on?
He said 6 weeks.
Well, I'm assuming that since the backgrounding just started late last week, that they said it might take up to 2 weeks to get that process completed, and then a month of, for him to give notice to his current employer. So that's where I got the 6 weeks,
So 6 weeks from like now?
from now.
Okay, so we're talking early May.
So we're looking at either the first or third Monday of May.
Okay.
John?
Should we not be cautious about personnel issues when we're talking about interim managers and things like that at this moment?
It would make sense.
I think we ought to just do that in personnel session, closed session, personally.
Thank you, John. Okay, moving on, item 5, new business. Item A, authorize manager to engage Raider Paint Company to perform headworks painting.
So we have had in the budget for several years about a $30,000 line item for various painting projects around the plant. I don't think any of it got used last year, but anyway, we have $30,000 in the current budget. We put together a project and put it out to bid to have the headworks facility, some of the piping pumps painted, basically to try and halt some of the saltwater erosion we've been seeing on our equipment. And Raider Paint Company came back as the lowest bidder with $15,190, and so I'm requesting authorization from the board to go ahead and move forward with that contract.
Are they local? I've never heard of them.
Tim, do you know if they're local?
I'm not sure, I'm not the one that collected the bids for this particular job, so I don't know anything.
Raider, yeah, not familiar.
Well, I,
Define local. California is local.
Midcoastside. I move to authorize the manager to engage Raider Paint Company as the lowest responsible bidder to complete Sam Headworks painting maintenance work in an amount not to exceed $15,190.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion?
This is otherwise known as holding back the ocean.
Can do it. Can paint it to keep the ocean from coming in. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? No. Approved, 8. Item B, ratify engagement of C.G. Eulenberg LLP Certified Public Accountants and Consultants for auditing services for fiscal year ending June 30th, 2015.
Directors, I'm bringing this to you because the SAM policy says that after 5 years, it has to, we require board authorization to continue engaging with an auditor. When we do that, we can do that for up to 7 years which is kind of the customary public policy. It just says that public agencies should obtain a new auditor after 7 years. And so I'm bringing this forward. Their last year was their 5th year that their audit they did in the fiscal 2014-15. And the reason I'm suggesting that we go ahead and approve them for a 6th year is that with as much staff turnover as we have happening, that maintaining some consistency with our auditor, somebody that already understands our books and is familiar with staff, that there's some value to that. And so we obtained a quote from them for performing these services for this year, and it was a 3% increase over last year, which I think is reasonable.
It used to be the recommendation was every 3 or 4 years,
Yes.
but the problem is that with all these new audit requirements, half or more of the companies that used to do this have failed and no longer audit government agencies.
Tom?
I believe it's well said by
Aye.
the general manager, and I would move this item.
Second.
Any further comments?
My annual font size comment. Auditors are fixated on small fonts. I would ask that you tell them that no deliverables should be in a font smaller than whatever the font size is on our agenda. I think it's
12
10,
12 point.
12.
Yeah, I'm in favor of that.
Hmm?
12 point.
Okay, works for me.
Would you like me to read the motion? Would that work better for you? Would move ratify the engagement of C.G. Eulenberg LLP Certified Public Accountants Consultants for auditing services for fiscal year ending June 30th, 2015.
In an amount?
In the amount of $22,145.
And we already have the second. Any further discussion? Questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? None. Okay. Item C, discussion and possible action on memoranda stating Sam's interests and concerns regarding Sam parcel and disposition of the Keyhole water course.
And directors, I put, this is basically just a very brief rundown of some of our concern with the operation here, and we're trying to put together something so that we can present it to the city staff, so that they have something that they can plan around and say, well, we've addressed these following concerns of SAM. I'm bringing the document forward because I wanted to get some feedback from the directors to make sure that I've covered any concerns the directors may have before I present this to the city staff so that they can roll this into their design, any of their design concerns. What we're looking at is, for identified concerns, is we would need to keep about a 10-foot portion along the shoulder of the road that comes down here for possible relocation of the water main that feeds the plant. One of my main concerns too is when I look at some of the recontouring of the drainage that are when they want to create kind of a meander, is that they start the turn for like the final turn of the meander far away from where the gate is, because my fear is that if you ever had a hydraulic overtopping of the meander and it was like at a natural arc that was pointed towards the gate, that's the one point where we do not have a berm around the plant, and this area is actually kind of like a below grade bowl, and so I want to kind of make sure that anything is any design considerations, make sure that it starts its, the meander starts to terminate well away from where the front gate is.
Can we ask that part of the project include putting a berm out there
I
between
don't-
the water course and the plant?
Well, it might be possible to maybe to do some kind of an elevated arc out there, and I can bring that concern, that concept up. I mean, as far as doing any elevation where the roadway is, where the gate is, though, because we take some pretty big delivery trucks in here for our hypochlorite and other chemicals, we'll have to keep that fairly level. But we could probably, start designing some kind of a berm or something farther upstream that kind of facilitates that. But I just wanted to make sure that that was, any design incorporated that, because I did see some hypothetical designs where it looked like the last turn was being made right up by the front of the plant here, and that kind of brought some of these concerns to the fore for me. We have an existing gravity sewer main that takes a lot of the Kehoe neighborhood waste stream and brings it into the plant. That's located out over here, and I would want some assurance that that's not damaged in the process. And I think they would go make that effort. I'm sure.
Is that below the grade of the channel?
It's below the grade. I think it's a fairly, it's a gravity line that's coming in out over here. It's just one of those things I wanted to note because I want to make sure that they put the extra effort in.
So is that owned by the city or by SAM?
I'd have to look into that. I'm not sure whether this is, I would suspect that being outside is that may actually be a city main, but it's, for my concern, it's just one of these things where it's a vulnerable area.
Well, yeah, one of the things I'm wondering is if any maintenance work ever has to be done on it. You have all these permitting agencies that don't like you anywhere near riparian areas, and so I wonder if as part of the permitting for the project, you could ask the city to get a provision in there that says this is an existing crossing, you need to be able to get in there and maintain it.
We could ask, and one of the things with my bullet points is whatever design ends up being developed that allows access for maintenance, and that would include the permitting piece of that, but I can highlight that in this draft. And then finally, I wanted to just memorialize that if we ever do recycled water, and it looks like we needed to get away from the use of the ocean outfall, or we didn't have enough customers to take it, then we might want to use that parcel for future ground injection, and that any design work wouldn't preclude us from being able to use it for those purposes in the future. And I don't see why it would, and those plans are all fairly far off in the future, but I wanted to memorialize it here because I know that was some of the concerns of the SAM board, that we wanted to have access to that site for recycled water disposal if we ever needed to.
And we also use the part of it right outside the gate as overflow parking, so that has to be retained.
On the north side or the south?
To
North.
so to speak, overflow parking.
No pun intended.
No pun intended. One comment I have on the right of way, actually I have two comments. Have you examined where the main is under the driveway versus where the water main is and where the water main might need to go? Because it probably doesn't meet current state requirements for separation distance. And so you need to make sure that the part you're reserving is in fact far enough away.
We can check that.
The other thing that it's likely that I'm the only one in the room that even understands this stuff. The SAM plan is a flagged parcel. We have the rectangle or something vaguely approximating a rectangle where the plan itself is, but the driveway all the way down to the frontage road is actually part of the same parcel here, and the city of Half Moon Bay granted an easement to SAM for the site, which means the whole parcel. So the driveway is actually on property owned by the city, just like the plant is. It's not a public road, as most people seem to think. It's never been a public road. It's completely on this parcel. And the flagged part that goes down there, the existing driveway is centered on that, and I forget what the width is. You have to find the file in here. I saw it back when Jack Foley had it in his desk, but I don't know where it is now. But I see the administrative services supervisor indicating she has the file. So the flag part that runs down there is roughly twice the size of the existing paved driveway. And the driveway is centered in that flagpole part. So that may factor into your computations on this.
I think it would be helpful to have, maps showing all these items and ownerships and easements.
What a concept.
Yeah, and I think Jim had mentioned at a previous meeting that he was actually working on something.
We have, and I've sent it to, at least, we got a couple, 3 different documents which we've sent.
I did transfer those when I got them to the city staff, so
Mhm.
I'd be more than willing to attach another copy of that to this document when I send it forward.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful to see all of that.
Would it make sense to also put it on the SAM website?
The map of the showing what?
The parcels, the SAM parcel and the former Lannister property, because the city may own the SAM parcel, but SAM owns the former Lannister property.
Well, I think maybe if you put on those maps where the proposed improvements or changes are, the water course change and so on, it would make it easier for the public to be part of and to observe the changes that are being proposed.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think the public should have, oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay, no, after, please, continue on. No.
I think the public should have access to all relevant data in order to provide meaningful input on the alternatives for the Kehoe water course, so makes sense to me.
Well, I think the actual proposal.
It's Jim's turn.
That's okay. It's just a minor point. Through the chair, can we ask Director Ruddick to remind us what the sequence of events was that we agreed to? So these are recommendations to the city. The city will be doing, what's the next step? Can you remind us of the sequence of events, please?
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, John, but the citizens have already weighed in, preferred alternative. And we got to that stage without, doing our due diligence, on the property itself, which we're doing now. So I'm guessing that city staff will be looking at this data to, come up with a staff report and a direction for the city council to consider, with public input, to move to the next step. So we've kind of paused, to get this information.
Right, and the next step is what? After the city council or the city makes their recommendations, what's the next step?
The city is going to digest the information and prepare a staff report for an upcoming meeting. Identifying options for the city to move forward.
Yeah, there's no project.
There's no projects yet.
What it's gonna, I think the sequence was the city is going to present to the SAM board their proposal, and then the SAM board would discuss it.
Yeah, I don't think we're there.
No, I understand, but I just wanted to build the sequence of events. So the city council and the city will present to the SAM board, and the SAM board will be able to have that information to make the decision.
Yeah, we're not going to exclude the SAM board.
Okay, that's, I just wanted to make that point, remind you of that point.
Yes.
Thank you.
Because it's such a fun group.
Further
Fun,
comments? Yeah, it sounds like we're still in the replanning stage, and we'll look forward to seeing all the alternatives when they pop up, so that'd be a good thing.
Good.
Any further comment on Rob's four suggestions? Any additional comments that that seems to cover most of the important things? Do we have to vote on that as a?
I suppose the one comment I might make is instead of limiting the potential uses, the item number 4 to possibly use as a ground injection site for recycled water, that perhaps it might be good to just say that Sam had purchased this parcel in case a need came up that it couldn't handle on its existing site. I don't know how that would work for this planning project, but I remember the discussion when Sam bought it, and it was, well, we may need it, we may need, in fact, we may need to use it as a wetland mitigation site if we need to do something somewhere else on the coast. And I think it's, maybe you don't want to limit it to a single future use. And put something in there that you certainly don't want to impede the rerouting of the creek. But at the same time, Sam did spend a fair amount of money on this for Sam's benefit, not just to undo the harm that was caused by bad planning in the past.
Director, if I amended that to say, to simply remove the, use the parcel as a site for ground injected water, and just say, Sam may wish to use this parcel for future SAM purposes.
I think that would.
To make it more general, that way it
That's-
covers more things.
What
The
does the
intent
rest
wasn't
of
to
the
lock
board
us into
think?
anything, I was just trying to point out one.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's wise, actually. With the water regime changing in California, I don't mean just precipitation and rainfall, but the management of it and the requirements for sustainable groundwater management and recycled water and et cetera, et cetera. It seems to me that things seem to be moving fairly fast in terms of policy, that we might want to just keep it general. So I'm concurring with you.
For future uses.
Yeah, I would, you know, hope to come up with some language that leaves it general enough that, the relocation of the water course has to not totally preclude SAM's other compatible uses. The severe environmental constraints, you know, after we bought it, then we basically got a report saying there isn't really much you can do with it. But there were actually two reasons why we bought it. One was we don't need any more close neighbors complaining about the plant.
There were
Okay.
a number of reasons, as I recall, that it was purchased, and I thought, I supported the purchase at the time, so I think keeping it general, and I'm sure the manager and attorney can come up with something that's.
Yeah.
Any further comments? I think that's a good idea to get the letter to Half Moon Bays. Seeing no more comments, do we need an actual motion for you to do this, or this is just
I don't think
information?
so. I just
Okay.
wanted to put that forward so I can get some feedback.
Okay. Moving on to item 5D, the budget.
Directors, following the budget workshop last week, we made some changes to the budget. I wanted to recap them briefly. One thing I wanted to note that in my note-taking, I missed the notation to put a line item forth for a hydraulic model, or a new hydraulic model study of the system. We can easily add that in tomorrow morning. And but since we're going to do that, I wanted to quickly discuss if you wanted to put a draft number for that study to it, so we can finalize that piece of it. I was going to suggest perhaps $20,000, since there's been quite a bit of work already done. I don't think it would take a major engineering effort to come in and review some of the new construction. And I think that would more than cover it. So I wanted to broach that. We could put 10,000 forward for it. It's just with engineering time, you know, $200 per hour, $250, whatever it runs. We'll go through some of it pretty quick, having them review the work done by Carollo and others, and then assessing the new construction of the wet weather flow management tanks.
I think the intent of that was not just to do an update as past updates have been done, or just on new portions, but to do a system-wide
Comprehensive one? Okay.
hydraulic study. That, I know our staff is very interested in having that, and that was that's along the lines that Councilmember Kowalczyk and
Okay.
myself were thinking. So
So if we set it aside for something as a comprehensive hydraulic analysis?
That was the
something like
intent.
Okay.
Yeah.
When was the last hydraulic modeling done? Was it decades ago, and so there have been substantial changes?
So it was done by Corolla, I think, although I sort of thought somebody said that SRT updated it.
I think the SRT might have done an update in 2005.
I think there were some updates done.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
wasn't, you know, partial, like you said.
Yeah.
Yeah, the original one, I guess, is 97 or 98.
Yeah.
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 Comprehensive would make sense then.
So, budget line item for comprehensive hydraulic model. Any thoughts on the budgetary amount for that work?
You're the expert there.
Well,
Did you say 20,000?
I think we could get some pretty good work going for $20,000.
Well, however much Corolla charged us the first time, we can probably get it done by the same amount now.
May I?
Yep, sure.
So, I would be very interested in the process that we follow to contract this out. I mean, as opposed to just having the same firm redo something they've done several times before, maybe finding a new set of eyes and a new set of engineering skills.
Oh, I'm
to be
specifically
applied to it.
implying not Corolla.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I think that this would fall under just the standard going out for, when you go out for bids.
Mhm. It's part of the RFP process. We have quite a bit of control, you know, as far as getting submittals from companies that have done, you know, say 30 studies of comparable size or something like that. We can craft a language such that we get large firms that have done quite a lot of these types of studies if we wanted to do that.
Might want to find out who CCWD used, wow, I think it was when Director Mueller was still on the CCWD board, but whichever firm they used, find out if they're happy with that work. Do you have any idea who it was?
The water's still flowing, so I think, I try not to get into valve sizes and
But I mean,
pipe sizes personally.
whichever firm did the
Yeah.
hydraulic study for CCWD,
Yeah.
but I don't remember who it was.
I'm sorry, I can't at this time
Well,
remember.
Excuse me, Rick?
Sure.
It would seem to me that you wouldn't want to limit it just to large firms. There are competent small firms that may not have as much overhead as the larger firms. And so I think putting out an RFP and
It
then
would be-
seeing who responds.
We wouldn't necessarily be crafted towards large firms. It would be how many, one of the criteria we could set forth is provide, say, 5 examples of systems of comparable size, which you have done hydraulic modeling for. That kind of language can let us tailor what we get.
Now, does
To some degree.
comparable size mean length of the system or number of amount of flow or number of connections?
That's something we can discuss any kind of peak like that. It could be system size, average flow, peak.
Well, because this is a
flow.
fairly unique system, given the length of the intertie.
Mhm.
That's what has created problems, and the way the different systems hook into the system, that has created controversies and hydraulic problems in the past, and so.
And part of the narrative that goes into developing an RFP, you do a lot of explaining of the unique process, or the unique pieces of your process.
Right.
And so that lets you filter out, so, you know, the companies by experience quite a bit. And when we explain some of the issues we have with Valimar pumps kicking on when we have high flows and how it impacts Montera, things like that, we can go in and do some detail like that. But we're not unique in the world when it comes to some of the issues we have. It's just a matter of, like I said, getting companies that have done and have got some deep experience with.
Right. Good, thank you.
So we'll go ahead and we'll add that into the budget tomorrow morning. I wanted to highlight some of the other additions that came from some of the output from that meeting. We put $20,000 aside for special counsel at board request to work with Sam to reopen the joint powers agreement. So we set up that account, and then From board feedback, we also added a line item for the addition of one staff member, a grade 2 treatment plant operator to the SAM payroll.
That was supposed to be done as a side note, that wasn't supposed to be.
We can deduct it back out, Director. I just wanted to, for the sake of keeping a clean budget, if you want us to remove it, we can remove the item from the budgets.
Yeah, the discussion did not say to add it to the budget, it said.
I think it was going to carry as a side item. It was a discussion that we could add it in later.
Which is the side item, the person, the staff?
7, F, I'm sorry, F. the last one.
On page 53.
Okay, the plant operator.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I have some comments on the $20,000 for special counsel. I think that, having read the JPA off and on over the years, all right, so I do have better things to read, but it is very interesting in and of itself, particularly because any document always depends on what the definition of is. And I think before we spend $20,000 for the services of a special counsel, we actually have the counsel who wrote the SAM agreement here. And so it would seem to me that each of the members of SAM should actually put forth a document about what they'd like to see a new document do. It's generally when you're planning a project, you have a goal. You don't just enter into something just to spend money. And so it seems to me that this could get out of hand fairly fast unless there's a fairly concrete set of expectations and goals that have been outlined. And one of the things that I think has been a problem over the years is we should probably go through the existing JPA and create a map of what the SAM system is, what SAM has been spending money on, what everybody's been spending money on, and have that picture worth 1,000 words sitting right there. I know Director Ruddick made a comment at the last meeting about, and there's always been this discussion about what's capital, and there's all these ISAs that have been redefined any number of times, and I think that that's been part of the problem, and so maybe instead of drafting it, we could just come to an agreement on, at the bottom of it, or yet another amendment, for that matter, that includes not only a map, but just a simple statement that says, this is the map of SAM, and it is the intent of every SAM board member for the preservation and protection of coastal resources to have our equipment at the highest and best level of functioning and state of technology. Because certainly when the SAM plant was initially built, I mean, we were back in 19th century technology. And since then, there have been a lot of changes in the industry. And a Regional Water Quality Control Board probably has its own set of documents that outline what they expect SAM to be maintained. And so it would seem to me that perhaps before we engage special counsel, there's some homework that might need to be done on this, so that we could get the highest and best sewer system for the entire coastside. We all want to protect the beaches. We all want to protect our neighborhoods, and I'm not sure spending money on council will do that.
First of all, Jim.
Yeah, so Catherine, you're right. So two things. So last year, the board agreed to assign each district to go back to their councils or boards and come up with some ideas of what they want, and then present that back to the board for further discussion. And as we mentioned last meeting, no board or city council did that. That wasn't done. So, that's a good idea, and that's part of the plan. The reason for the 20,000, I think, was to have that in the budget in case we do get to that point, where the city council and the boards present their thoughts. Then we can move on and not wait another year. So I think that the idea was to put it in the budget for now.
Yeah, if I could just jump in 1 second before that, it was like, we didn't say how we're gonna do the process. We want all the inputs and things like that. This was just, we know it's gonna eventually be a really big legal document probably, and we just chunk some funds out there to sort of lock it in.
Yeah, that was my understanding. I mean, we had $30,000 in the budget for a few years for painting, and we only used 15,000. So we saw it as a, sort of like a placeholder, but, if you'd like, we could say $20,000 for consultant services pursuant to potential JPA amendments, because we might need mapping services or, regulatory consultation. But we have money assigned, allocated to help with the process. And I agree with Rick, we didn't specify how this should happen. We just raised some, good issues. The regulatory framework has changed, technology has changed. There are, various gubernatorial edicts on addressing climate change.
Yeah.
So, there's a new framework, a new context, so.
Yeah, and
That was just a
I
placeholder.
think maybe there could be a footnote in the budget with an asterisk or something that explains that, because as somebody who has read budgets in the past, you're kind of going, wait, they budgeted for this and they did that, and what happened here? And I think this is a very important issue for the environmental future of the whole coast.
Whatever's next.
So I think that we should all go back to our member agencies and get an agenda item to discuss what potential changes to the JPA agreement we would like to see. And then those changes would probably have to come back to this board and for reconciliation. And then if we get past that, then we'll need some legal work to hammer those changes into contract legalese language.
Right, but to Director Ruddick's point, we may need consultants, and generally consultants do not charge the same as attorneys. So it would be a much better use of SAM funds to be able to get this to the point where the agreement is essentially worked out and it's just put in legalese as opposed to having the attorney draft it to begin with.
Right, well, what I outlined and what I just suggested is that it gets to an attorney as the very last stage after it's gone
Right.
through
We all agree to that.
the member agency boards and then back to this board and then maybe other.
Consultants and regulatory
Yeah.
agencies.
Gubernatorial.
Oh, let's send it together.
Like that word?
So if we
Rob is very gubernatorial.
if we retitled the budget line item, say, this money is requested for consultant services, will be, which will be tasked with studying possible amendments to the joint powers agreement for SAM.
Yeah.
Is that,
Well, but I don't see, well,
I wouldn't specifically say just for amendments,
okay.
because we may all vote to, we have all these ideas and it may just be easier for them.
Start from scratch.
Just rewrite it
Data gathering.
rather than more Band-Aids.
Tasked with studying the joint powers
I'm
agreement for
a
SAM.
little uncomfortable with the studying word there, because I think it's the member agencies that are gonna do the studying.
Yeah, I don't think we have to say studying, just, $20,000 for consultant services pursuant to.
Related to the joint
Yeah.
powers
Yeah.
agreement.
And that could include legal consulting too, so I think that's generically covering everything.
Yeah, Director Reddick is absolutely correct. We've added 2 wet weather flow facilities to the SAM system since it was done, and those need to be incorporated in the mapping and in all of the stuff, so.
I think the mapping's a great idea, by the way. I'd love to see a map, everything.
Rob, any further items?
I did Pursuant to some of Director Warren's questions, we did some staff work on the past salary history and projected salary history with some of our, with the proposed, the possible addition of the treatment plant operator. So we have some of that material here for your review.
Thank you.
Why was this not in the packet?
We were still working on this.
I'd like to, should we discuss this particular item first? Or should we look at it?
Absolutely.
Okay with that?
Yeah, no, I think it's always good to look at a fresh look after this many years of JPA and it makes the regulatory agencies more comfortable for the future.
Well, the obvious things that jump out at me are the rather substantial percent increases in base salary.
That one of those there.
In which, for which positions, Director?
I'm looking at the total line.
The total lines, a lot of that is reflective of the proposed new positions or authorized personnel, the collections maintenance workers position. That
So
is
the bottom two that are noted new hire,
correct.
Right.
which are 100%. So
If you look at that, there's $112,000, $113,000 in new costs with the collections maintenance worker and the certified operator too. And so when you factor that into the base salaries, the 3.75%, that's that's part of the terms and conditions of the MOU, which was agreed upon.
Where do you see it, 3.75?
The base salary for fiscal 2015-16 budgeted.
That's this corner?
That's the far right hand side. That's the upcoming budget.
Okay, but what about this 10.95% increase in the current fiscal year compared to the previous one?
Well, part of that's reflective of the collections maintenance worker two for $51,375, and then there was the MOU increase, and then individuals' salary increases when we split the positions for the treatment or the supervisor field operations and supervisor treatment.
He went over this in detail last meeting, but.
Okay, but every single number here is significantly higher than the 3.75. I mean, some of them are 3 times that.
Well, what we have is, as part of our MOU, there's you have vertical and lateral certification incentives, which lateral one can be 1%, vertical is 2.5%. So if we have an individual that say gets a performance review and that's a 5% increase, and then they do a vertical certification, so they certify for one grade over in say treatment, that's another 2.5%. And if they get a lateral certification in collections, say for example, there's an additional 1%. So you have the possibility to increase your salary from 3.75% with the base, which is agreed to in the MOU, and then the other terms that are set. So you could have 3.75, then a 5, then a 2.5, and a 1. And so that was part of what was agreed upon in the MOU document. And that's why the crafting of those documents, there's a lot to it, and it bears having a lot of paying attention to it when you come to these agreements, because it's great to set up incentives for your staff, but you can't blame them for taking advantage of it either. And so if you have ambitious people that are willing to go and take these get these certifications, you have the potential for several percent of additional increases on top of your budget. And that's
Well, and excuse me, Rick.
Go ahead.
The underlying philosophy is that with more skilled staff, you have higher levels of efficiency, both for the operations of it, for the safety of your plant, and for the environmental concerns of your plant. So having more highly skilled personnel is of a huge benefit, and I'm sure Director Mueller can testify to the fact that regulatory agencies like to see well-trained staff, and staff that's constantly improving itself.
I'm not disagreeing with that, but you're basically saying that every single staff member did something beyond They did something to get a raise on top of the 3.75. You're saying every single staff member did something. Well, I want to see for each one of these lines, each one of these 14 lines, I want to see all the components that make up that percent increase.
We can do that, that's gonna take some significant staff time, because we're gonna have to go through every single personnel record and do.
Well,
do
this is
chapters.
the salaries are the biggest single line item in our budget, and I'm not just gonna give a hand wave to this. This is this board's responsibility to watch the money here, and there's something wrong here, and I'm gonna find it. Okay? I'm telling you there is something wrong here, and I'm gonna keep asking for documentation until I find out what's wrong. And as it stands right now, I'm gonna have to recommend to my board that we not approve this budget until I know what's wrong here.
I would suggest that it is a sign of good leadership and good management, that these opportunities are available for the staff to be able to improve their skill set.
Do you
And
believe that every single staff member did something to get an increase beyond the MOU 3.75%?
You know, I would, first I'd have to look at the MOU and see exactly what's going on. But I believe you have, that Sam, we have excellent staff here. And I'm not surprised. With the changes that we have had since Tony left, people have had incentives to improve their skill sets. And I think the staff at SAM is exemplary. I would not, I'm not going to have a problem with this, because I do believe they are improving themselves.
I think that we would, no, I think that we would wanna trust Rob. Rob is an outgoing person, he's doing the best, he's done a great job, this is the best budget we've ever seen, we've agreed. And you know something, yes, maybe we will be able to get those breakdowns, but in the meantime, we might not be able to get them before we approve the budget, but they could be on an ongoing project that we could find, where we trust Rob and his staff to present that information to us while we continue on.
Director Warren, something that was pointed out to me too is, I think, you can correct me on this, but wasn't some of the increase in there factored in from the carryover from one fiscal year to the next?
That's right.
Some of the increases? Wasn't that part of that?
There were some retro ones from prior
That's right.
year where people had gotten certified. I don't understand the exact mechanics, but where they're certified, so there was retro pays from a year and a half, 2 years prior. So it's kind of like this catch-up sort of thing. But
I don't know that I'm following.
With retro pay, what'll happen is if somebody gets certified, say in March, and it takes a couple of months for the information to get back to the district, and we finally find out they got the certification, say 2 months later, we pay them back to the date when they passed the test, and so that's retroactive pay. And so some of these, they'll cross fiscal years, things like that, which can throw, there's some of this carry forward effect from one year to the next on some of these things.
All right, well, I want to see the breakdown of each one of those 14 percentage. Of course, one of them's zero, so.
Thank you. I would suggest that rather than having staff spend time on a paper chase and staring at their nails, that we make it part of the audit, that they do a look at several random staff files to see how this happened. So that they can just pull a couple files at random and see if there were improvements or not. And that makes it part of the audit. It doesn't burden staff with paperwork, and it would answer your question.
Only if the board agrees to have me talk to the auditor in advance.
Through the chair, typically the auditors
Yeah.
do examine payroll records and personnel records, and they do so randomly. They pick maybe 3 to 5, depends on the year, but they do
That's fine.
that
John?
intrinsic sort of forensic auditing
I think that's what an audit should do. John?
Yes.
And I think, with respect to the concerns of member agency Granada, Director Warren, regulatory agencies look at your violations. And it doesn't seem like we have too many violations with this personnel that are being paid fairly, in my opinion. And so I think those are some things you gotta consider. So we all wanna have employees that improve, and sometimes when we do, they leave us. But it seems like we do have not the turnover of other businesses out in the community. So personally, at the moment, I'm very comfortable to let our city council review this budget.
And I'd be happy if the auditors are informed that they need to do this.
Yeah.
And, you know, they pick whatever random, or, you know, pick random and maybe one of the big ones. And then I think that would cover it for us. I wouldn't start with the assumption that something evil is going on, and we have to somehow, you know, dig it out and stop it.
One of the things I can point out is within the MOU, what the last pay raise was intended to be based on was what they call total compensation. So it was 3.5% of your, when the union looks at a basket of, and they call it total compensation, it's your, say your salary plus your healthcare benefits, that's part of your compensation package. And so if it's, say, $3,000 per month plus $1,000 worth of insurance, then it's 3.75 or 3.5% of the 4,000, not 3.5% of the 3,000. And that was what was baked into this. It was extraordinarily complicated to figure this out, and it ended up with these oddball increases where there's these fractional pieces in here. But that was apparently what was agreed to upon this. And if your Oscarus Rungus went and approved it,
I
we went all
cannot
through this.
believe that this board would have approved an annual increase based on total comp. It's just not done. It's never, ever done, and I don't believe that we did it. I wanna see that language in the MOU. I do not believe that we did that. And that may very well be the explanation for what's wrong. Let me put it this way. 10.95 1 year and then 13.73% the next year, that's a 25% increase over 2 years. That's not sustainable. We can't do that. Just not sustainable as a business model.
Director Warren, in that 13.73%, the bulk of that is those two positions that we've asked for. The rest of most of the increases are 3.75%, except for a few individuals that aren't topped out on the wage scale, and that's where you have the 6.34. Some of the higher ones are where they're eligible for certifications, and so we assume they're going to get the certifications. So we budget conservatively, I guess, along those lines. We assume our staff is going to get those certifications that are authorized.
I think this, I can just jump in for a second, because we're kind of going around in circles. I think it would behoove us all the next time we do the union negotiations to keep all this in our minds, so we can, you know, forewarned, and then we can make sure everybody knows everything about how it's going to go. I think it's good that we have the auditors looking at several of these at random, just to ensure that nothing, you know, got missed or doubled. I think that covers it. Debbie?
I would just say, you know, provide narrative with the numbers too.
Sure.
A narrative explanation of why, you know, this is so. And that way we don't waste a lot of time going over this ground at meetings, but we have the narrative and we can ask questions based on that.
And that would be nice to have for whatever goes to each of the districts and the city council as
Yeah.
well. To allay any confusion.
I want to move on, so what do you got?
There's information that I want, you know, I don't care if the other directors don't want it, I want it, and I think that it's my responsibility to my ratepayers to count the pennies. And there's something wrong here, I'm telling you.
You don't
there's
have a
something wrong.
consensus here, Leonard. You got 7-1 votes to let the auditors look at it.
Then I wanna talk to the auditor before he starts the work.
We can do that. We can have you, usually and typically the treasurer communicates with the auditors, but we can certainly
Director Warren, would it
have
increase your,
Director Warren speak with them as well.
would it increase your comfort level if we had your labor negotiator, Oscar Strongest, speak with you? He's the one that crafted this.
Can you get me a copy of the MOU right away?
I can tell you exactly where it is in the MOU. There's language in there that says across the board
I would like a
increases.
copy
And he
of the
told me
MOU.
that
I would
across
like-
the board, then it was going to be based on total
I would
compensation.
like a
Leonard.
copy of the MOU.
Excuse me, Leonard, I
I
think.
don't need it to be interpreted, I can read it for myself, I want a copy of the MOU.
I think it was useful for the people who are watching this meeting to hear the language. I'm sure the manager will get you a copy, but for
Susan's-
folks who cannot be
she's going
here and
again.
don't want a copy, it's nice to have an understanding for them.
Yeah,
Okay. Is everybody happy with that?
Yeah.
Well, we don't have a motion, because it's just, if the auditors do their jobs,
Yeah.
and they will do, and Leonard will get a copy of the MOU.
And Leonard can talk to the auditor.
So we don't need a motion.
To the auditor and to Ostrich.
John?
Yeah, just
Would help
again
talk
briefly,
Yeah.
I believe in City of Half Moon Bay, what auditors do come in and visit with finance committee members without staff.
Mhm, that's correct.
And I think the same thing happens at any audit. So you're more than welcome to sit in, I
When I
believe.
was treasurer, the treasurer talks to
Yeah.
them.
Sure.
That way there possibly irregularities that that person would feel free to talk about.
at Granada, I believe the auditor actually solicits all the directors to see if they have any comments. I'm not totally sure of that, but since I've been contacted in the last 2 or 3 years each time, I just assume that it's all the directors.
Rob, did you have any additional, those additions to go?
No, that was it.
What we would normally be looking for in this case then is the motion to send.
Oh, can I back up a little bit? I did want to cover the proposed, the capitalized maintenance project. There was a board request for additional information as to whether there was any changes from the regional water board when it came to sizing of your force mains. I contacted them and asked them if they had any peak wet weather criteria for sizing things, and they said that there's no way that they could come up with a blanket storm event size, because it would depend on topography and things like that. And what they said is, well, they rely on the agency to have the competent, contractors or staff determine what kind of capacity they need to have in their force mains and things like that. So that was, I wanted to follow up with that as regards to that project, that there wasn't anything that triggered an upsize in the force main replacement project that we were discussing out at, between Montero and Ballamore, which is part of this budget.
So the hydraulic modeling will be very useful in that.
It would be very useful, but what the water board is saying, that's Sam's burden to develop. It's not, if they came up and said, you must design for a 10-year event, a 10-year, 6-hour, and something happened, and then they would end up with that liability on their back, when it's really the responsibility of the agency to design adequately towards
Yeah,
anticipated flow.
I think it's a, question of how much, risk we want to assume. If you think just the 5-year storm is sufficient for, building a fairly new project,
The one thing I'd like
Don't
to point out
expect
is that
bigger
that rain
storms?
event was well over the 5-year event. It was closer to a 10 or a 25-year. And what that force main is sized for is, say, a 5-year, 6-hour event, but that doesn't factor in the storage in the Walker tank, which can let us shave off almost 400,000 gallons, or the downstream capacity of the wet weather flow management project out of Portola, which also lets us isolate something like 300,000 gallons. So when you factor in those two things, that can change the dynamics of what your force main has to be spec'd out at. In this particular storm, even if we'd had a bigger force main, we would have just overtopped the Portola facility sooner, because you're only able to push so much through a straw into a bowl, into another straw into a bowl, if you understand. It's like, filling the champagne glass pyramid, if you want to think of it like that.
But you realize, of course, that if the IPS was not a limitation, then the plan will get overwhelmed.
Correct. These things have to be kind of addressed in concert, but the specific, the diameter of the force main in this instance really is, I don't want to say it's irrelevant, but it's not as germane as it would be if that was the only conveyance between here and the plant. That would be one thing, but we've had these interception facilities that allow us a lot more flexibility.
Yeah, and in that
Just like
storm,
Debbie, you had any more comments?
I was just wondering, are we certain that that was actually a 10-year storm? I mean, I heard from other communities that they thought it was more like a 5-year storm, but.
It depends on and where the rainfall waves. In Montera, it was between a 10 and a 25-year
That's
event.
pretty-
And now farther out this way, it was less.
Okay.
Jim? Yeah, good.
Well, I'll just say that because of the Walker Tank and the wet weather project and the staff hustling, there was no overflow.
Correct.
We saved a lot of money by not having by fines, and things did work, even if it was a 5-year or 10-year for the whole system. The system worked, the wet weather overflow project and burner strip, the Walker Tank both worked.
I thought the Burnham Strip facility had been used in some previous year.
To my knowledge, I think this was the first time we utilized it, Tim, if that.
To the extent that it was utilized, yeah,
Right.
it has been used in the past, but not,
It didn't get full.
it didn't get full like it did this.
Right, but I think we did use somewhere around a third to half the capacity once before.
That might be the case.
Was that for construction, or was that for maintenance, or was that for a
We
storm?
used it a couple times for maintenance procedures and
Oh.
whatever other things, but in an actual storm event like this, like I said, to the extent that it was actually used in conjunction with the Walker tank to prevent us from having any sort of overflow.
And it could be added on to, it could be increased in capacity.
Okay, we have 2 more sections.
So,
Rob, are there any more
No, that was-
comments for the budget? Any comments from the board, or I can enter time for a motion to send this out to the
Rob,
agencies?
where was the, what's the section that has the, the increase in compensation that we were talking about?
I have a quick question while Rob's looking then for John. What are the regulatory agencies, do they have a maximum storm year that agencies should design for? Or if there's a 110-year storm, we get a typhoon and there's a spill, all of a sudden we should have designed for it?
You know, best of my history and knowledge, they're not really involved in land use planning and pipe sizing. I think it's all up to the agencies out there that are developing and future development, and that's not what their role is sizing pipes.
Right, but do they say to an agency, you planned for a 25-year storm and you should have planned for this 110-year storm, so we're going to get you in, we're going to find you?
I think the answer is no.
Yeah,
Sounds
I've
like-
never.
They
in
don't
my
do that,
memory.
It sounds like if they look at you and it looks like you were just woefully uncaring and unprepared, then boom, the hammer comes down. But if you
Right.
get serious intent and you're expanding your facilities, and the mother of all storms hits, or you can't plan for a 200-year storm. That,
I think,
everybody?
correct me if I'm wrong, perhaps if there were spills, or a spill or a big spill, then you might be inspected and they might say, you need to upgrade, your system is not adequate. So that's when the hammer might come down. I guess that's what you're saying. If there's a spill, they inspect.
Right,
There's an order.
East Bay Mud has spent billions of dollars on their wet weather overflows and went through tremendous amount of litigations and mitigation on wet weather issues that really goes back to the agencies out there at I&I and how we're doing, how they're gonna improve that, because as you said, there's only so much you could build.
Right.
So it's an overall picture, they really
Yeah.
look at the big picture.
I think that's reasonable.
It's taken years and years to bring this to closure with East Bay Mine.
Not bad.
There's something that, I mentioned this, kind of in passing to Rob, that, I'd like an engineering opinion on whether we can do anything like this or not. And, it depends on how big our easement is, for the IPS. But, what I'm thinking of, and, this is, I'm not an engineer, I need an engineer to evaluate this idea. Could we, as we go to replace segments, and we have this one coming up here that's being budgeted for now, could we fit in the easement 2 pipelines that each one of them is sized to carry our maximum expected dry weather flow, and then a permit condition from the Coastal Commission that says you are never ever allowed to use both of them at the same time except in wet weather.
I'm gonna vote to not take that up.
I think that's growth inducing.
Once you make the parallel pipeline.
But if it's.
I like the idea, but that's growth inducing,
Well,
really.
but not if there's a restriction that only one of
I
them
don't
will be
think
used at a
that'll
time
ever
during dry
happen.
weather.
I agree with Director Mueller and Director Lohman that we should decide on moving this budget forward. Did you get your question answered on the?
To the top of page 6, first paragraph, starts off effective July 1st, 2014, classifications covered by this bargaining unit will receive a 3.5% across the board increase. It's the language that says across the board increase.
I'm sorry, across the board means everybody gets it, it doesn't mean total comp.
Your,
It does not mean
Leonard.
total comp.
Sam's representative told
I'm
me.
sorry, we're not gonna debate that now.
I would suggest
It's
you
either
talk to
true or
Ostras.
it's not true, and let's worry about let the legal labor person
Yes.
define that. If it was our mistake that we assumed we thought something and that wasn't what the labor people assumed,
Right.
then that's a problem. And we'll watch that next time, but we are not gonna debate that now. The legalese word of the labor negotiation. We'll get Oster in here and he can maybe report at the next meeting if we want. And we can discuss that, but that's not, we're not gonna argue that tonight. It's done.
Can I get Ostras's phone number?
Absolutely.
I think
Okay.
that's a good call, Ron.
So I think it's, we either did it right or we made a mistake, and we'll do that better. Still looking
I
for a
think that's
motion
very
to
good.
move the budget forward.
I make a motion, move the budget.
Second?
That's waving her
We
hand.
have the position on the side letter, I guess, or a side note, is that included in the
Are
budget?
you talking about F?
Yes, sir,
Oh, okay,
just
I-
for clarification.
yeah, I think that was in this budget. If you wanna discuss that, we can
No.
discuss it.
No, I just, we just need to know if we have to
You just
remove
want
the
it-
line item or to.
Oh, correct, what we're looking for is direction on item F in my budget summary. The
Yeah.
staff requested one grade 2 treatment plant operator. Is that approved? That's part of this budget, so. if
I'm
we-
sorry, a check question came up at the same time. Could you repeat that, please?
Okay, what staff is looking for is clarification that as part of moving this budget forward, that item F in my summary, which is the addition of a grade 2 treatment plant operator to the SAM payroll is approved.
At the budget workshop, we directed that it be done as a side item, not as a integrated part of the budget.
And we can delete it with one line item, Director. The only reason I did this was just to create
Jim, you had a
one
comment?
set of papers.
Yeah, I'd like to, with Rob's help, with Rob's help, and then maybe Tim's comment, I'd like to have the board consider keeping this on the budget or adding it to the budget, but it's not on. I'm not sure which it is.
It's on there,
It's on there now?
yes.
Okay, so my motion was to approve this budget. But I'd like to, just to talk about it, to talk about state regulatory requirements for operators, maybe you could address those requirements. And then talking about the situation during the December 5-year or 10-year event. Maybe Tim can talk about the vacation schedules, the coverage. Maybe you could both give us some background as to why another operator is needed.
The situation with the SAM plan is we need a minimum of a grade 2 operator to be able to work unassisted here at the plant. We have 3 people that meet that criteria. And so, since we operate 7 days a week, we need to take those three people and cover a 7-day-a-week operation. And so what happens is, if you can imagine, you have one person go out on vacation or one person get sick, especially when we have these wet weather events where we need a lot of bodies here. And all of a sudden, we're in a very tenuous position when it comes to having certified operators on site. And so part of the desire of staff here is to create enough of a pool so that we're not disallowing vacations for 4 months of rainy season every year. That we have enough redundancy in operations where we're not vulnerable to having one person get sick and one person be out on vacation and suddenly have one operator to cover this place. And so that's what I'm looking for is authorization to hire a grade 2 operator so we don't have to take the 2 years to get an OIT trained up. That's what the state requires is almost, was it 1,900 hours? 1,800 hours?
It's 1,800 hours.
1,800 hours working in the plant before they can become to test for a grade 2 operator. So that's almost 2 years before we can rotate somebody into that. So we have a great employee now who's been training here for, gosh, he's been here for.
He's got another 600 hours.
He's got another 600 hours to go before he can even test to help take some of that load off. But so what I'm requesting is it'd be considerably easier if we were looking at filling in another body in collections. The collection system does not have that 1,800 hour stipulation. The people that run this plant are held to a very high professional standard, and you can't just bring somebody on and get them up to speed in 3 months. It does not happen. And so what I'm looking for is authorization to go out and recruit somebody that already has that grade 2 certification with the state of California, with the understanding it's going to take them some time to learn even how this operation functions. But it won't be 1,800 hours in service before we get them there.
As far as the budgeting process, whether you agree or not on adding an employee, it might be the simpler process to leave the employee in the budget and send that out, and then if agencies have a problem with that, then they can vote no on that item rather than have it as a note, oh, do you want to add it in or not add it in? My vote would be, however you feel, put it in the budget. Okay. And send it out to the agencies, and then have the agencies come back and say, no, I hate that idea, or it's hard. It just seems simpler rather to put it in, and then if you don't like it, take it out.
How does this connect with the reallocation from treatment to collection that you gave us the chart last week on?
It's on the back.
On the back of this one.
Yeah.
I don't think this, in this, we didn't roll in the new treatment plan operator. I don't see anything.
Yeah, I don't.
Sorry.
It would be 100% treatment, basically.
But what was the reallocation from?
If you added that person into where it says the FY 2015-16 budget, and you've got the admin, collections, treatment, and DWSCP, it would be basically you'd be adding 100% to the treatment column, so it would be 4.275 on the labor balance between collection and treatment. So that person would be a dedicated employee to the treatment plant.
Okay, so if I understand this labor by department chart, it looks like the reallocation from treatment to collection between the two, between 14-15 and 15-16 is basically 3.7 minus 3.275, so about, what is that,
About 0.5.
0.4. 0.425. So is that an accurate summary of this chart that you comparing the two budgets here, you're reallocating .425 of a person from treatment to collection.
Well, there's in the current budget, at least in the chart you're looking at, a small portion of that person went to NDWSEP, and part of it went to collection. Most of that reallocation is a function of when the responsibilities to run the treatment, the plant supervisor and the field operations supervisor, when I took that body, which was before, it was 100% a treatment plant individual, and I made him responsible for basically the collection system operations. That's what that rebalancing reflects, is we took a significant piece of the person that was in treatment, with that being 100% of his job function, and focused him on managing the collection side of the operation. That's why the reallocation looks the way it does. Now, if we build in another collection or a treatment plant operator grade 2 into that, that would bring the treatment balance up to 4.275, so it'd be a little bit, would actually be better than it was last year. But the large shift that you see in this, that document reflects me taking a full-time treatment plant operator and tasking him with some of Tony Pullen's responsibilities to maintain or manage the crew that does the collection system work. So to take that person and to allocate that labor correctly, I had to say, well, you're not 100% in the treatment plant anymore, because that's not the focus of his job anymore. He helps operate the treatment plant, but also 50% of his time at least is riding herd on the collections crew. And so that's what reflects, that's why that change in allocation was there, as I was trying to come up with a real, or at least a better estimate of how time was going to be spent with the crew when I took some of Tony's role and split it out amongst the crew, the senior treatment plant operators.
Which is part of the reason why the grade 2 treatment plant operator is being requested.
But remember when Rob proposed to the board that instead of replacing the technical services supervisor in like kind, that we do this reallocation and the rotating thing, and hire an engineer and contracts manager instead, we were specifically told that it would not increase the head count, but here's the head count increase right
Well,
here.
one of the things I'd like to point out is that Tony was like a certified grade 5 treatment plant operator. I'm not gonna be able to get an engineer that has that skill set in all likelihood, and then that person would end up being just as overburdened as Mr. Pullen was.
I mean, I'm just reminding everybody that we were told no increase in head count, and here it is.
Are people comfortable with leaving that in the budget? And then each of the agencies can debate that
I think that's a
strongly.
good, I think that's a good solution.
Okay, we have agreement to just leave it in, and then they can be debated outside. And if, two agencies decide no, then we can debate that back here.
So
I'd like to just, get this moved out, because it takes months through the agencies, everybody knows that. And there's several debates, and there will be another bring it back and work all the differences out again. So the faster we get this out to the agencies and their general managers, I think it's gonna be good for everybody, so.
But just to review before we go on, can you state one more time the regulatory requirement for that second, for the grade 2 treatment operator?
The regulatory requirement is for the individual to be able to work weekends.
Okay.
They have to be a grade 2. Otherwise, we could hire out for an OIT, but we would still be 1,800 hours
But if we
behind.
didn't, we'd be short an operator,
I'm not sure what, if you can take that.
Yeah,
What the minimum staffing level for the plant is.
Recently, can I talk about the state inspection?
Absolutely, please.
Recently, the state inspection came in. It was Marcia Lau from the State Water Resources Control Board. And she actually looked at our organizational chart, and she looked at the size of our treatment facility and the number of actual certified operators that we had. And to be quite honest, I would be surprised if she does not write something in her report about that. Truly, we are understaffed for certified operators at our facility, based on if there is ever any sort of emergency. In the December event, Rob was out at the pump stations. I don't know if you guys knew that. Rob was out at one of the pump stations from like 1 in the morning to 4 in the morning, because we didn't have enough staff to monitor the stations out there.
How much,
That's not good.
on a percentage
not good.
basis for the whole 7-day week, what percentage of the time is there no one at the plant?
At the, we operate
On site at this plant?
14 hours a day. 14 hours a day, but it is monitored.
Is that times 5 or times 7?
This time 7. So there's someone here 10 hours a day, and the rest of the time it's monitored by the SCADA system. Any sort of alarm comes through, it goes through either the SCADA or the hue and cry alarm system, where they will contact the operator directly. And we're all close enough that we can, I mean, I'm here, and
Right, but
if I'm
there-
at home,
there-
I'm here, and, you know.
There is a
3 minutes.
substantial fraction of the time when there's actually nobody physically on site.
Correct.
That's all
I'd be ready for a motion.
Yeah, I've already made the motion.
And I already seconded that.
Yes.
Second. Further discussion? All those in favor of passing budgets out to the agencies?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed or abstentions?
I'm gonna abstain on this,
Okay.
noting that, by some idiot court ruling, an abstention counts as going along with the majority.
Your signature.
No
does?
abstentions, Leonard, you gotta make a decision, yes or no, simple as that, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
Do you want me to vote no on it?
They did.
And one abstention. On to the general manager's report, item 6.
It's fairly, normally my reports are a little bit more in detail than this. I've spent a lot of my time focused on trying to get the budget kicked out between the budget workshop and currently. I did, one thing I would like to point out is I did meet with Montero Water and Sanitary District staff. They are, at least in the beginning processes, at least, correct me if I'm wrong, of looking at maybe expanding some of their staff and maybe taking over some of the collections responsibility, and they're trying to discuss with me how they might go about that as far as notionally how to build their staff up. So I've had some discussions with Clemens on what I thought would be some of the best practices, you know, making sure everybody is cross-certified so that it has water operators that also do sewer, things like that. It was just very preliminary, but I wanted to highlight that, trying to pass on some of my previous experience, I guess, with growing agencies to talk with them.
Isn't it fairly common that water treatment operators are also certified in sewer and vice versa?
Most places that have multiple responsibilities find that they get the best bang for their buck in getting everybody cross-certified. And I would say that ultimately, this organization needs to pursue exactly the same thing, where ultimately, everybody should be a grade 2 plant operator, so that you have 9 or 10 people instead of 3 people in mechanic slots and a couple of people in collections.
Well,
That's going to
getting
take a great deal of
What am I
time.
getting at? I thought, you know, I'm not at all sure of this, but I thought that some of our people had water certifications.
So some do.
I think Gabriel does. Gabriel has a water.
Well, yeah, because he maintained
Gabriel does,
the
Correct,
the
but
Miller
for
Ridge
us,
system.
typically for a sewer agency, no. But for agencies where you have collection system and water distribution, it's totally common. Now, every agency I've worked for that has had multiple responsibilities, like the water system and sewer, has everybody cross-trained. because
Yeah,
they
they're
need
similar enough,
flexibility.
there's no reason why not.
And don't forget, we'll be looking at recycled water in the future. And so,
I had a very specific question on the recycled water
I
in
did
the committee. When I was reading it, I didn't note that it was not on the agenda.
right.
Is that because we launched that engineering upgrade part of the study, or the monies for that, or?
It's why I had so much focus on this that I haven't really, to be quite honest, I haven't had much ability to retask myself to get
Could you,
moving on that.
could you remind us what the latest task for the recycling
Well,
committee
that's
was?
what I was asking.
Okay.
When we authorized them some monies in the last meeting
Correct.
to review the project, review the documentation,
Correct.
update the pricing to at least
Right.
get to the point where we know what this thing would cost.
Yeah, and
Right.
I haven't had much
Yeah,
time.
no,
to do
that's-
that.
that's
But
understandable.
as long as that is,
Yeah, but that's why that's not.
That
there.
is the
So I
next-
just
the
didn't
next
have
step.
anything new
No,
really
yeah.
to report on that at this
That's
time.
understandable.
I don't, until we can do that, we probably, there's no point bringing the committee back together again until we have that.
It should have
data.
something to.
Could you remind me what the
product to
committee
look
is
at.
again, please? One more time?
Scott and Rick.
Scott and Rick and you?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So that'd be fine. So again, now that you've passed the heavy burden on the budget, if we can launch that piece,
Absolutely.
because
Yeah.
everybody knows recycled water is gonna be really, really important.
Yeah, especially now, we need
It's-
to, we look at that.
Earlier, you were telling me that that the Granada Community Services District is going to be emblazoned on the wall here in the not too distant future.
We have the font is at the foundry. Those are like customized brass letters that I think they only have one manufacturer.
It took me a number of weeks even to find somebody that does that type of work anymore.
They're cast brass.
They're a heavy polluter. Heavy metals are big
Heavy metals.
polluters.
What happens to the old
Wastewater
ones? Do we get them?
What's that?
They're actually,
The old one?
they're reutilizing a lot of the
Yeah, I figured
existing
as much,
letters,
but-
so there's only a handful of new letters that are gonna be.
Well, you have to move the word district down and then take out
I
sanitary.
think they can handle
That
it.
is exactly what's gonna happen.
Put it on their budget.
Can we do that? Okay.
I don't think so.
I agree, they should.
Who paid for?
It's moving along. and
Moving
they are
along.
happy to
All right,
expand.
next.
So they give-
Attorney's report.
Nothing, Mr. Chairman.
I just lost my agenda here. What's the-
All right, attorney's report, I think the next one is director's report.
Any director's reports?
None.
Following that is adjournment.
I thought there was a closed session.
We'll go to closed session.
Well, there is.
There's nothing in the packet that's on the agenda. It says public employee appointment.
Interim general manager.
Item 10.
Do we have a closed session item, folks?
Yes. we did.
I mean, we did,
Staff?
okay.
Yes.
Good. I mean, I have it here, I just want to make sure we had information to bring.
Yes.
Okay, then we should,
Closed session.
we should go to closed session.
Yes.
Can we take a quick break?
Yes. Well, we'll need it to wrap up everybody real quick. This should go around.